The clink of expensive glasses and the murmur of pretentious conversation surrounded me like a foreign language I wasn't fluent in. Candlelight flickered across white tablecloths, creating shadows that danced along with my anxiety. I checked my watch again. 45 minutes late. I should have left 30 minutes ago, but hope is a stubborn companion. I fidgeted with the hem of my dress. The nicest one I owned, purchased from a clearance rack last summer. The waiter approached for the 4th time, his polite smile now strained with pity. "Another glass of water, miss?" he asked, eyeing the untouched bread basket. "Yes, please," I whispered, my cheeks burning with humiliation. I'd been nursing the same complimentary bread for nearly an hour, watching as couples around me ordered appetizers, entrees, and desserts. I reached for my purse and peeked inside, knowing exactly what I'd find. 5 crumpled dollar bills. All I had to last until payday. I had agreed to meet at this upscale restaurant, only because Eric had suggested it, promising to treat me. "I'm looking forward to impressing you," he'd written in his last message. I should have known better. My roommate's enthusiasm about setting me up with her boyfriend's friend had blinded me to reality. The universe had a way of reminding me of my place. The entrance door opened, and I glanced up with pathetic hopefulness. But it wasn't Eric. Instead, a hush fell over the restaurant as a man entered, flanked by 2 others in dark suits. Even from across the room, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. Like the air pressure dropping before a storm, the maitre d' hurried over, nodding deferentially, gesturing toward a private alcove. As they passed near my table, I caught a whiff of expensive cologne. Something earthy and masculine that made me think of leather-bound books and aged whiskey. I kept my eyes down, but I could feel a gaze lingering on me. The man who had commanded everyone's attention was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. His dark hair was neatly styled, and though I only caught a glimpse of his face, I noticed how his jaw clenched slightly when his eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. I looked away immediately, but not before I saw something flash across his expression, curiosity perhaps, or something darker that made my pulse quicken. My phone buzzed. A text from Eric. "Sorry. Not going to make it." Something came up. No apology, no offer to reschedule. Just a dismissal as casual as tossing away a used napkin. My throat tightened as I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The waiter returned, placing another glass of water before me. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, his tone gentle but expectant. Other tables needed this space. Paying customers. My voice caught. "I think I'm going to leave. My date isn't coming." The admission felt like swallowing glass. Something changed in the waiter's expression. Sympathy mixed with embarrassment on my behalf. "Of course, miss. No problem at all." I reached for my purse, preparing to skulk out of this place that was never meant for someone like me, when a voice interrupted. "Excuse me." The waiter turned, and I looked up to see one of the suited men from the private alcove. Up close, he was intimidating, broad-shouldered with a scar running through his right eyebrow. "Mr. Russo would like to extend an invitation to join him," he said, his voice low and measured. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry?" The man gestured toward the alcove where the dark-haired man sat, now watching our exchange openly. "Mr. Russo noticed you've been waiting alone. He'd like to offer you dinner." My cheeks flamed anew. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly—" "He insists," the man cut in. Not unkindly, but with a finality that suggested this wasn't a request one refused. I hesitated, clutching my purse with its pathetic $5. Pride warred with hunger and curiosity. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, a stale granola bar at the daycare center where I worked. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about strange men and dangerous situations, but another part whispered that I had nothing to lose. "Just dinner," I clarified, finding my voice. The man nodded once, then stepped aside to let me pass. Walking across that restaurant felt like crossing an invisible boundary. Conversations hushed as I passed, and I felt eyes following me, judging the obvious mismatch of my clearance rack dress against the caliber of company I was about to keep. As I approached the alcove, I finally got a clear view of Mr. Russo. He was older than I had first thought, late 30s perhaps, with features that spoke of Mediterranean heritage. His eyes were dark and penetrating, set beneath strong brows, He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something magnetic about his presence, an aura of absolute control that both unnerved and fascinated me. He stood as I approached, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with the dangerous energy he emanated. "Thank you for accepting my invitation," he said, his voice a low, smooth tenor with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. "I'm Dominic Russo." "Lily Spencer," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "This is very generous of you, Mr. Russo, but I don't want to impose. Please, call me Dominic." He gestured to the chair across from him, which another suited man pulled out for me. "And you're not imposing. I find dining alone inefficient." I slid into the seat, noting how the leather-bound menu before me had no prices listed. "Is that why you invited me? Efficiency?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's say I recognized someone who deserved better than they were getting tonight. The waiter, a different one from before, appeared at our table, pouring water and reciting specials with reverent deference. Dominic ordered wine without consulting me, then looked expectantly in my direction. "Order whatever appeals to you," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I ordered the first pasta dish I saw, too overwhelmed to consider options. As the waiter departed, an uncomfortable silence descended. I found myself studying the heavy silver rings on Dominic's fingers, the perfect Windsor knot of his tie, the way his suit jacket stretched across broad shoulders that suggested regular physical activity despite his evident wealth and status. "Your date was a fool," Dominic said suddenly, causing my eyes to snap up to his. To keep a woman waiting is disrespectful. To abandon her is unforgivable. Heat crawled up my neck. "How did you—" "I notice things, Lily Spencer. It's a necessary skill in my line of work." "And what work is that?" I ventured. His smile widened fractionally. "Import and export, primarily. Business development. Asset acquisition." He took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving mine. "And you? What do you do?" "I work at a daycare center," I replied, feeling the vast gulf between our worlds widen with every word. "I'm also taking night classes in early childhood education." "Children," he said, nodding slowly. "They're honest, unfiltered. There's value in that." The wine arrived, a deep red that caught the candlelight like liquid rubies. The waiter poured a taste for Dominic, who approved it with a slight nod before my glass was filled. I took a sip and nearly gasped. I knew nothing about wine, but I knew this was exceptional, rich and complex in ways that made the occasional cheap bottles I shared with my roommate taste like vinegar in comparison. "Do you believe in fate, Lily?" Dominic asked, swirling his wine gently. The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure. Do you? "I believe there are no accidents. Every meeting has purpose." His gaze was intense enough to make me look away. "Your date's failure became my opportunity." "Opportunity for what?" The words escaped before I could stop them. His eyes darkened. "To correct an injustice, to ensure the evening wasn't wasted." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something true about yourself, Lily Spencer. Something you wouldn't tell most people on a first meeting." I should have been frightened by his intensity, by the commanding presence that seemed to shrink the room. Instead, I found myself answering with unexpected honesty. "I'm terrified of ending up invisible," I confessed, "of living a life so small that when I'm gone, no one will notice I was ever here." Something shifted in his expression, a flash of recognition, perhaps. For a moment, the mask of cool control slipped, revealing something raw beneath. "Invisibility is a choice for some, a sentence for others," he replied softly. "But I see you, Lily Spencer." Our food arrived, momentarily breaking the strange tension that had formed between us. I took the opportunity to collect myself, wondering what madness had possessed me to share something so personal with a stranger, especially one who radiated such dangerous energy. As we ate, Dominic asked questions about my life, listening with unsettling intensity to my answers about growing up in foster care, my struggle to pay for education, my small apartment shared with a rotating cast of roommates. He offered little about himself in return, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. Dessert appeared without being ordered, a delicate chocolate confection that melted on my tongue. As I savored it, I noticed Dominic checking his watch. "I have matters to attend to," he said, signaling for the check. "My driver will take you home." "That's not necessary," I protested. "I can take the bus." His expression hardened. "It's nearly midnight, Lily. I insist." The bill arrived, and he signed it without glancing at the total. As we stood to leave, I felt lightheaded. From the wine, from the surreal nature of the evening, from the intensity of his presence. Outside, a black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. The scarred man from earlier opened the door, and Dominic gestured for me to enter. "This is Marco. He'll ensure you arrive home safely." "Thank you for dinner," I said, suddenly uncertain. It was unexpected. Dominic reached into his jacket and produced a business card, pressing it into my palm. His fingers brushed mine, warm and slightly calloused. Not the soft hands I would have expected from a businessman. "My private number," he said. "If you ever need anything at all, you call, day or night." "Why would you do that? You don't know me." He stepped closer, and I caught that scent again, leather and spice, and something uniquely him. As I said, "I see you, Lily Spencer, perhaps better than you see yourself." Before I could respond, he brushed his lips against my cheek, a gesture both formal and startlingly intimate. "Until next time," he murmured against my skin, then stepped back. I slid into the SUV, my heart racing as the door closed behind me. Marco got into the driver's seat, asking for my address in a clipped tone. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back to see Dominic watching, his expression unreadable in the shadows. Only when I arrived home, thanking Marco awkwardly as he insisted on walking me to my door, did I realize my fatal mistake. In the whirlwind of the evening, I had forgotten to tell Dominic I had a 6-year-old son waiting at my neighbor's apartment. A son whose father had abandoned us both, whose existence I guarded fiercely from the judgment of others. A detail that would surely have changed everything about our encounter. I collected Jamie from Mrs. Patel's apartment, thanking her profusely for keeping him past her usual babysitting hours. My son's sleepy weight against my shoulder was both comfort and burden as I carried him back to our tiny one-bedroom apartment. "Did you have fun with your prince?" Mrs. Patel asked, her eyes twinkling with well-meaning curiosity. "He wasn't exactly Prince Charming," I whispered, conscious of Jamie's slow, rhythmic breathing against my neck. Her smile faltered. "Men these days, no consideration. You deserve better, Beta." If she only knew how the night had actually unfolded. I couldn't bring myself to mention Dominic Russo. The encounter felt too strange, too private to share, like a dream that would dissipate in the telling. Inside our apartment, I tucked Jamie into his bed in the alcove we'd partitioned off from the living room with a colorful curtain, our makeshift second bedroom. I brushed his dark curls from his forehead, marveling as always at how much he looked like his father, despite Michael having been out of the picture since before Jamie was born. "Good night, my little knight," I whispered, our nightly ritual. "Good night, Mommy Queen," he murmured back, already drifting into sleep. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection as I removed my makeup. The woman looking back seemed different somehow, her eyes holding a new wariness, or perhaps awareness. I reached into my purse and pulled out Dominic's business card. Heavy cream cardstock, embossed with only his name and a phone number. No company, no title, no address. Just like the man himself, it revealed nothing while commanding attention. I tucked the card into my nightstand drawer, behind a stack of unpaid bills, as if hiding evidence of a crime. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dominic's intense gaze, felt the ghost of his lips against my cheek. What kind of man commands that kind of respect, or fear, from everyone around him? What kind of import-export business requires armed guards? And why would such a man take interest in someone like me? The morning brought the usual chaos of getting Jamie ready for school and myself prepared for work. Reality reasserted itself with each mundane task, making breakfast, packing lunches, searching for Jamie's missing shoe under the couch. By the time I dropped him off at school, last night felt like something I'd imagined. The little Sprouts daycare center where I worked was housed in a converted Victorian home, its cheerful yellow exterior belying the financial struggles of its owners. I'd been there for 3 years, working with the 3 to 4-year-olds, children whose personalities were emerging in fascinating and sometimes challenging ways. "Earth to Lily," said Vanessa, my co-teacher, waving her hand in front of my face. "You've been staring at that finger painting for 5 minutes. Hot date last night?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "The opposite. Got stood up, actually. That jerk Eric? I never liked him, even through Jen's descriptions." She shook her head, her braids swinging. "His loss. Though you look more thoughtful than heartbroken." I hesitated, then offered a sanitized version. "Someone else bought me dinner after Eric bailed. A businessman. It was strange but nice." "Strange good or strange call the police?" Vanessa asked, half joking. "Just intense, like talking to someone from another world." I busied myself arranging art supplies for our morning activity. "Ooh, mysterious." She wiggled her eyebrows. "Rich?" "Definitely," I admitted. "But that's not Miss Lily." "Miss Lily." A chorus of voices interrupted as our classroom door burst open, signaling the arrival of our charges for the day. The conversation was mercifully cut short as we were enveloped in the beautiful chaos of 12 preschoolers. The day passed in a blur of activities, snack times, and minor emergencies involving spilled juice and disputed toy ownership. By late afternoon, I was helping Zoe, one of our quieter children, put on her coat when the center's director appeared at the classroom door. "Lily, there's someone here for you," she said, her expression unreadable. My heart skipped. "For me? I'm not expecting anyone." "A delivery," she clarified. "I've put it in the break room." I finished buttoning Zoe's coat, then made my way to the staff break room, curious and slightly apprehensive. What awaited me stole my breath. A massive arrangement of white roses and lilies dominated the small table, so extravagant it seemed to overwhelm the shabby room with its peeling wallpaper and ancient coffee machine. "Holy crap," Vanessa whispered from behind me. "That's not a flower arrangement. It's a floral declaration of war." With trembling fingers, I reached for the small envelope nestled among the blooms. The card inside bore a simple message in elegant script. "Fate rewards honesty. Dinner. This Saturday." "I'll send Marco at 8. No signature, but none was needed." "Who's Marco?" Vanessa asked, reading over my shoulder. "And what honesty is he talking about?" "It's complicated," I managed, my mind racing. I told him about my aspirations, my fears. "Well, whoever he is, he's got good taste." She touched one of the lilies gently. "These must have cost a fortune." They did, I was certain. And therein lay the problem. I'd spent one surreal evening in Dominic's company, and now he was sending extravagant gifts to my workplace, making assumptions about my availability, treating my time as if it were his to command. I should have been offended by his presumption. I should have called the number on his card and politely declined. Instead, I found myself calculating whether Mrs. Patel would be available to watch Jamie on Saturday night, and what I might wear that wouldn't look as hopelessly out of place as I had felt at that restaurant. The rest of the week passed with excruciating slowness. I told myself repeatedly that I would cancel, that entertaining any connection with a man like Dominic Russo was foolish at best, dangerous at worst. Yet I didn't reach for his card, didn't make that call. On Friday afternoon, as I was gathering Jamie's things from his classroom, his teacher pulled me aside. "Lily, I wanted to let you know. Jamie had a bit of a rough day," she said, her voice lowered so the remaining children couldn't hear. "There was an incident at recess. Some of the older boys were teasing him about not having a dad." My heart sank. "Again?" She nodded sympathetically. "He handled it well, but I thought you should know." We had a good talk about how families come in all shapes and sizes. I thanked her, then found Jamie sitting alone on the bench outside his classroom, his small face set in a stoic expression that broke my heart. At 6, he was already learning to hide his pain. "Hey, kiddo," I said, sitting beside him. "Ready to go home?" He nodded, reaching for my hand as we walked to the bus stop. We were halfway home when he finally spoke. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" The question, though expected, still felt like a punch to the stomach. I'd answered it before, tailoring my response as he grew older, but it never got easier. You do have a dad, Jamie. He just isn't part of our lives. But why?